CJNU 93.7 FM Nostalgia Radio in Winnipeg is the proud broadcast partner of the Health Sciences Centre Foundation Bannatyne Legacy Circle Celebration. Presented by Johnston Group in partnership with Canad Inns, with additional support from Belfosh Signs and outstanding branding. I'm Adam Glynn, and I had the pleasure of putting together this very special broadcast during a very unusual year. If you missed any of the programme, you can listen back to it in full on the Health Sciences Centre Foundation website and at cjnu.ca. Of course, in putting together a 2-hour radio programme, not all of the material that we recorded makes it to the final broadcast. But, exclusively for you, we have access to all of the bits that were left on the cutting room floor. And so I'm delighted to introduce the full conversation I recorded with Dr. Ian Sutherland in late 2020. Joining me in the studio now, Dr. Ian Sutherland. Ian, thank you so much for sparing some time. It is lovely to meet you.
It's good to meet you and to be down here.
It's really lovely to have you in the studio. Ian, we're going to talk about a lot of things today. Of course, we're going to talk about the Health Sciences Centre and the Foundation, but before we get to all of that, we're going to go right back to the start, literally, because for the benefit of those who've not met you before, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, everybody calls me Ian appropriately, but my name is really John Beattie. I had a Scottish grandfather, and when my parents called me Ian, or John, he said, well, that means Ian to me in Gaelic. And so he called me Gaelic, and that kind of stuck to the point where when the wedding invitations went out, many of our very closest friends said, I thought Eva was marrying Ian. Who's this John? But we finally got that sorted out. Although I think I'm told the minister at one point did actually marry Ian to John.
That's slightly problematic.
It was at the time.
Yeah. Thankfully, I assume all was straightened out and paperwork was, I's dotted and T's crossed.
Yes.
Very good. So, were you born here in Winnipeg?
Born in Coldeswake.
Ah, okay. And tell me about childhood. What were you interested in when you were growing up?
I don't have very vivid memories of interests in childhood. We moved back to Winnipeg when I was about 1 year of age. My parents were deaf, and I was born just at 32, so right, it's the Depression. Difficult enough for people to get jobs, anything, but for a deaf person to get a job was even worse. So my family moved back to Winnipeg, which is where we had extended family. And we lived on Cornish Avenue, which was nice. One of the 3-story buildings. And stayed there for a number of years and moved to Walnut Street, and then to Ethelbert Street, by which time my dad built a house out in Westwood.
Oh.
On Oakdean Boulevard. And it's a longer trek to university, but they were very happy, and so were we.
It's always an amazing experience when one builds one's own house.
Exactly.
Because you get to plan the whole thing yourself, get the layout exactly right, or if you don't get it exactly right, you have to live with that forever.
It's what you wanted.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah.
So, clearly your dad was handy.
He was very he's trained at the School for the Deaf as a carpenter. And he didn't do much of the construction, but he had ideas about it. And he had a very, very comfortable home.
That's wonderful. Do you think you were inspired by your parents when you chose what you were going to get into at university and beyond?
I don't. And it I wonder about it several times. But when I started off, I went into physics. I didn't go into medicine. I don't know why, but I didn't. And finished up a master's and had a publication to my credit. And I looked at that publication and said, Ian, if you carry on the way you are, this is all you're going to do. Is this really what you want to do for the rest of your life?
And that's a big question that we often have to ask ourselves.
Absolutely. And fortunately, I had a good friend, a very, very bright guy, and he'd gone into medicine, and he was acing it. Gee, John's doing pretty well. Maybe I could do as well. So I decided I'd go into medicine, and people looked at me, how are medicine and physics ever going to merge? Because there's very, very few of us around at the time. But it was a struggle, different way of learning. In physics, you try to understand the system. Back in my day, human body was not as well described in terms of systems.
Of course.
And it was just a matter of memorizing this and this and this were connected. So it was a transition, but wonderful profs at the medical college. And then you get on the wards, and you look for other skills and talents to apply for sicker people. And never regretted it. Never, ever regretted it.
Which is an amazing thing to be able to say when you look back at a career, especially when you made a change, relatively speaking, that young.
Yeah.
The sciences now are all a little bit more intertwined, and I'm sure a lot of people who are at university now would probably argue with me and say that they aren't, because everyone feels like they want to specialize and be an expert in their field. But just like you said, you know, the physics of the human body is now something that people would study more. And there's more crossover between physics, biology, and chemistry, certainly, than there has ever been.
Yeah.
And the medical world is evolving and changing fast. There's a few areas I want to go into on that front. But first thing I want to ask you is, as somebody who worked in the medical field and now continues to support HSC through the foundation, clearly you've had exposure and experience in the healthcare system at different times. How have you perceived the change over time?
Well, it certainly has changed. For one thing, the amount of money involved is phenomenal today. It was considerable back in the older days as well, but I was chair of the HSC awards committee for a while, and if we gave an award, it would be, I don't know, $15,000, maybe $20,000, and some of that would go for equipment, other would go to paying a student or whatever, and it would be frequently a first paper for a staff person. But it gave them a start, and it also established that these people had credentials and legitimacy locally, and they were good enough to win a local award.
Of course.
So that was something. Getting more involved more recently, I'm astonished at the size of some of the awards, but they don't, they're appropriately awarded, and we have very good reviews of their research. So it's the amount of money, I guess, that astonishes me now.
The scale of things just continues to increase.
Yeah. And the equipment is not cheap, it never was all that cheap in the overall context. It is not cheap now, and there's a lot of competition for good people.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to attract good people, we have to support them in their real love.
That makes a lot of sense, and definitely that importance of investing in our hospital and investing in our community is so crucial and critical, and of course we'll talk about that in more depth. Going back to your sort of university experience, you said there wasn't too much crossover between physics and medicine, say, but you ended up sort of forging a path in your career that kind of combined the two as best you could in terms of getting involved in radiology.
Yeah. Don't ask me why it ended up in radiology. I've often thought about this. I asked myself, well, why didn't you get involved in ear, nose, and throat? Where there's physics of audiology and so on, and you can apply that. It never seemed to turn me on. So, for whatever reason, I don't think I went into the field I'm in because of my parents, because of the deafness. I haven't asked my psychiatrist that one yet either.
Well, I'll do my best not to make this like a session. I can confirm that there is no couch in the studio today.
Okay.
More's the pity, actually, because it'd be quite comfortable. But I don't know, maybe it was that other side of physics, using waves and... I don't know. What was your biggest interest in physics when you were studying it? I'm curious.
Well, as a matter of fact, three of my closest friends, one of whom was a fellow who had gone into medicine, had a group of 4 of good friends and people who were interested in something more than just we got at school. We set up a chemistry lab in the basement of one of the houses. And I still to this day don't understand why the Sigurdsons put up with this, but they did. And we set up a chemistry lab, and I guess I was getting more involved in chemistry than I was in physics, for no good reason. And we just palled around, and so it was something to do with friends.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because sometimes it's people that lead us to making decisions rather than anything else.
Yeah.
And speaking of people, while you were at medical school, I understand that you met your better half.
That would be exact timing, yes.
So tell me about Eva.
I'll try. Trouble is, it comes at an awkward time. An anniversary coming up in 2 days.
Of course.
When she died. I've had lots of thoughts and regrets of things I didn't do, and so on, so that general type thing.
But you are a human being, and
but I am a human being.
That is exactly what we are all hardwired to do.
Yeah.
And indeed, the most important thing, for me anyway, and I don't know, I'm no theologian, I'm no philosopher, but when you have loved someone and when you have lived with someone and you have someone who you care about, it's quite right that we get upset.
Yep.
Because if we care that much, it would be wrong if we didn't get upset.
Indeed.
So I am envious of you for having had such an incredible and amazing relationship for so many years. And you are a lucky, lucky man to be able to reminisce and remember so many good things.
I can't add to that. That's exactly how I feel.
Well, God, maybe I should get into this world. I'll see if I can get qualified.
Yeah.
But seriously though, Ian, I mean, clearly the two of you hit it off.
Oh, yeah. We ended up going to the same church, and that was fundamental. The church at that time had what did they call it? I guess a Christian education person, I'm not sure.
Right.
But she started up a group of young people, some strays that were wandering around, and we had a group of 6 or 8 in that group, which grew to about 20 or 25. It was a very significant organization, and feeling that we had carried us through. Going to a funeral on Tuesday of a lady who was part of that group. And we had just maintained our relationships throughout the years. They were great times.
I've often heard it said that age never gives up and time never stops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Clearly the two of you had an interesting time together. Can you tell me about any particularly funny moments?
Well, I guess I found it funny. I'm not sure Eva did. But she was working at the library, Winnipeg Public Library System. And I was going to school. And we had stayed with Mom and Dad for a while. And they had a grandfather's clock. And when one of the babies would start to fuss or want attention, she would get them their feeding and settle them down and walk them to the point where they were going to sleep. And this grandfather clock was wired, had weights on it, but it would sound every half hour. And so at the end of half an hour, when things were just settling down, the baby was going to sleep, the grandfather clock would go off, the baby would wake up, and Eva was not happy. Because she was then faced with the whole issue of getting baby back to sleep and knowing that the clock was going to strike the next half hour. And all you had to do was just take the weight off. Of course, it didn't go off. And I told her that. She let me have it. I couldn't blame her. But... And then she would complain as well. The only time she had a holiday was when she went to the hospital to have the next baby.
Oh, heavens above.
Yeah.
Dear, oh dear.
Yeah.
So the two of you had a good family, right?
It was, in recent years we've looked back and we wouldn't change a thing. It was an interesting lifetime. And the people at the college were very helpful. We were lucky.
Can you tell me about your kids?
Well, there's 4 of them, 3 boys and a girl. The boys, the oldest is Scott, and he went into radiology.
Clearly he was inspired.
I don't know if I did anything to inspire him to go. I didn't persuade them to go one way or another. I just said, do something you find interesting and will love.
That's a great piece of advice, full stop.
Yeah. And he ended up in radiology and ended up doing neuroradiology, which is a very challenging field, and did very well at it. There in Winnipeg, 4 kids. And they have 2 grandchildren, so that means it turns out we have 7 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
I still say we because I think of it that way.
Well, indeed, it is still we.
It is.
And it never will not be.
It never will not be.
That's how it works.
Yeah. And good kids. Michael was the second one. His forte was not studying, it was playing hockey.
Amazing.
And he went on to play some hockey at the university level with the University of Winnipeg. Not a star, but he was obviously happier on ice than anywhere else. He went on to become a teacher and worked at the Bannatyne Adolescent Treatment Center with disturbed kids. It was a natural. And if they had kids who were problematic, well, where's Michael? So Michael would go and try and diffuse things. But he and his wife are wonderful people. And they have 4 kids. 1 grandchild. The one part of the family is down in Warden Winkler. And then there is our daughter, Karen, who I think caused Eva the most anguish, except in later years. And she died of malignancy when she was about 50, I guess. And shortly after that, Eva died. So that was a tough 3 months.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding.
And then the 4th one, another son, Eric, was married to Donna. 4 kids. Karen had 3 kids, and they had 4.
Wow.
So in total, there was 15 grandchildren.
Quite the menagerie.
Yeah, it was. Every one of them individual and different interests and great spectrum of a conversation. And Eric ended up in medicine, in anesthesia and pain control.
Mm.
So they're in Winnipeg. Michael and Donna live in St. Andrews, and Karen lives in the city.
Hmm. Clearly, you have an incredible group all around you.
I have lots of visitors, except
Present circumstances accepting, for the reasons that are far too obvious to all of us.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating, but I guess a reality of life right now.
Exactly.
But it's amazing to me that you have lived and worked in this community, you have volunteered in this community, and now you have this incredible family doing great things in this community too. It must be pretty, I don't know, gratifying sometimes to sit back and go, do you know what? They're a pretty good bunch.
Yeah. Well, I think even I would do that periodically. But she would say, we made a mistake. We should have done this instead of that.
Hmm.
Well, okay, you're right. We should have. But it didn't seem right at the time, so...
Well, that's the benefit of hindsight. As any historian will tell you, hindsight is 20/20. But humanity can barely see what's in front of our own faces. So, you make the decision you can in the moment, and you crack on with it.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious now, thinking about your working career. You've raised a family, you've had a happy and long marriage, and all the while you've been doing interesting things in the working world. You ended up specializing in radiology, even though you're not quite sure why, but clearly it became a passion for you. So can you tell me about what you did in latter years?
I went into a subspecialty of radiology called nuclear medicine, and that was it turns out, a good choice. It is among the fields in medicine that are closest to physics. And I think that the fact that I ended up getting a master's in physics, and had a master's in physics and had a degree in radiology, and had an interesting time when I worked for the feds. I worked Chalk River for a while, and then in Pinawa, in a structured organization with a reporting line and so on. And more than once, I'd hand in a report and would come back and say, "Come and see me about your reporting." So I'd go and see superior. He said, "I don't understand what you're saying. Can you do this again and make this clearer?" And so I had the benefit of critics who were, again, wonderful people, constructive as all get out. And so I learned how to write things. And that was a tremendous benefit, which I didn't realize at the time. I think, so-and-so didn't have to rewrite his report. Why do I have to rewrite this one? But then after I got back to medical school, I remember one of the physicians I had great respect for. I was preparing a report, and he was chairing the committee. He had the report in his hand, and he said, "Ian, I have to tell you, this is one of the best reports I've ever seen." So I learned something through those experiences.
That's high praise.
Yeah, from him. It was, I didn't need any praise for the rest of my lifetime.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at the laundry list of amazing things that you've done, and I don't want you to sell yourself short, because you've sat on many boards and been involved in many organizations. For example, the Atomic Energy Control Board, Defense Research Board, National Health and Welfare. You have a lot of perspective of a lot of different organizations and agencies. But through all of this, you've still maintained a passion for what happens at Health Sciences Centre.
Yeah.
What is it about HSC that you think is so special?
When I was in Pinawa, and I'd done my internship at Health Sciences Centre and had been in Deep River, now in Pinawa, and was deciding where the hell do I go from here, because it wasn't exactly right either. And then there was this field of nuclear medicine that I was starting to read about. And as it turns out, just about that time, there was a new head of radiology, a gentleman by the name of Doug McEwen. You may have read about doing is it a kilometer or a mile a day to raise money for his charitable foundations.
Amazing.
Yeah. And he's older than I am. But he said, we need somebody in nuclear medicine. So you'd come train in radiology, and we'll get you some employment in nuclear medicine, some training in nuclear medicine. So he made it possible. And so here's Doug McEwen paving the way for me. And it just worked out.
And the opportunity for us to sit down and talk today has come about through your legacy gift between you and Eva to the Bannatyne Legacy Circle. And of course, giving to a foundation, I try and remind people all the time, is an intelligent way to make any kind of a gift, because your gift just keeps on giving, because you're investing in the future of the community. Clearly, HSC and your work experience and life experience there had enough of an impact on you to make you want to give. Why do you think it's so important for people to support the work that happens at HSC?
Well, I guess first of all, it's not just me, it's Eva and I.
Of course.
This is money that we accumulated. I earned it, but Eva saved it. And it's a shared gift. And we just figured, I forget what the saying is, but for those to whom much has been given, much is expected. And that was just Eva's motto. It's not just from us either, because there's so many people who have helped us along the way.
Of course.
So many organizations. And so many opportunities were there. And the need is so much. So we feel here, we're bloody lucky. Let's give this back to where it can do some good. And I'm sure there's a number of places we could have given money. But Health Sciences Centre, I guess the way I got started on this was to tell you the story. When I was coming from Pinawa to be interviewed by Doug McEwen and others at the Health Sciences Centre, I can remember it very, very clearly. But at that time, the emergency parking was, how do I put it? There's where the ambulance is parked now.
Oh, yeah.
And the emergency room is right there. And I remember coming through that door and looking around trying to find where I wanted to go. And it was the strangest feeling, I think I'm home. It just felt like home.
That is something that you can't create yourself. That is something that happens outside of oneself.
Yeah.
Really remarkable when you think about it.
It was. When I told Eva that, she said, "Oh, I guess we're going back to Winnipeg then." And she had put up with one move after another, and she was getting a bit used to it. I said, if they offer me a job, I'm game. And they did, and it worked out.
I think the definition of a life lived well is when you can look back at the sum of all the things that you've done, the decisions you've made, good, bad, and otherwise, the experiences you've had, and then sit back and say, I don't think I'd change it.
No. And I think we we both felt that way. She was quite ill and not insecure. And she said, I don't know what we would have done differently. And I don't either.
And clearly the two of you were a dynamic duo. And in what you've been able to do by making a legacy gift to the Health Sciences Centre Foundation, you have ensured that others will be able to receive great care well into the future.
That's our hope.
And it's dare I say, it's got to feel good to know that you will be doing good even long after both of you are gone.
I think so.
Ian, I cannot thank you enough for your time and for all of your wit and wisdom in sharing some of your stories with us here today. I can't thank you and Eva enough for the contribution that you've made to the foundation. And for anybody who's thinking about making a contribution, it's not difficult, is it?
Oh, no. They have a staff that's makes it very, very easy, almost too easy. But they do an exceptionally fine job, and just have to sign one or two pieces of paper and it's done. And I would certainly encourage people to support the Health Sciences Foundation. It's one of several hospitals. They all deserve help. We should do whatever we can to support them and other groups in the city as well.
That's a really crucial point. Now, more than ever, is the time to support the causes that mean the most to you.
Yeah.
So I hope that someone listening now feels inspired by your experiences and your stories.
Hope so.
Dr. Ian Sutherland, you are a gentleman. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed the interview.
You've been listening to a special recording produced by CJNU 93.7 FM for the 2020 Health Sciences Centre Foundation Bannatyne Legacy Circle celebration. To learn more about the work of the HSC Foundation and the Bannatyne Legacy Circle, visit hscfoundation.mb.ca. And to find out more about Winnipeg's non-profit community cooperative radio station, CJNU 93.7 FM, head to cjnu.ca. I'm Adam Glynn. Thanks for listening.